So looking at the positioning of the business, now at this point, early scaling and really entering the market, it's really like you should be on top of this market timing perspective from the very beginning all the time. But at this point, you definitely need to reevaluate and check and find ways of how do you measure the market timing aspect of your current MVP or your current product on the market, and for any new products or innovations that you're going to introduce later on, whether they are expanding the existing product, whether it's bringing significant feature, whether it's pivoting your business because you see the market timing change, but you really should have some kind of way of measure how is this market developing beyond how your own business is developing, because you should have guideline of how is your business developing in context of the market itself. And how you define your market depends on who is your customer base and the customer segments and what is your mission and so forth. Typically, you see with experience, you start to see at least it's not linear like this. It may have a certain tipping point, or it has a certain tipping point overall if it's a new innovation on how that gets to markets. But if that is breaking down, and if it's a longer market development, which basically to get into real global scale anyway takes years for anything to reach all the corners of the world, you will see significant changes typically during the change of the year. It's just how people kind of reorient themselves to the new year, the learnings from past year, the different things, and then making decisions how they're going to do or operate during the next year. This is the picture in the context of innovation in the markets, and this is also in the context of how to position where are you with your company in context of this kind of template where the global megatrends are changing all the time. There are bigger ones, they move slowly, but these are things like AI development, blockchain development, how the self-driving cars would start to change the whole landscape infrastructure. What is the climate change impacting on people's behavior, purchasing decisions, strategies they apply, regulations that is being applied. These are the types of megatrends. Then there is the status quo of how businesses and products are working, how the businesses models are working, and then there's the innovators who are making change, trying to cater or because of the global megatrends to build actually something that gets good traction and then starts to become the new normal. So in this kind of phase, you should look at your company positioning periodically as part of the strategy work, but definitely at this point when you are entering the market, and you should really learn to look at the market through this kind of lens. On the business model side, so after the product market fit has been validated, so that's the idea to product to business. Now it's also time to start validating better business model or further business model or optional business models. So that means, for example, if you have a product that you were selling just one-off, maybe there's some opportunities to convert that into subscription-based service model. Maybe there's an opportunity to cater the product or service more as a platform business model instead of you serving how the product and value is delivered alone. So for example, an easy example would be having an iPhone and all the applications would be provided by Apple versus having a marketplace and applications, so others can develop applications for that, and eventually actually those applications, many of them are better than the original ones only being built by one. So that's converting from providing own products versus to becoming a platform business model. Again, different ways, and you can, when you connect this with different market priorities, you can test with different business models also in different countries with different types of setups without needing to worry about how is your primary markets going to respond to that. Specifically, if you do this with different languages, then you basically have a pretty strong separation between how customers experience your product in one country versus how they experience it in another country. And you can quite safely test totally different business models for serving or catering those products to those markets. Focus on the scalable business part, what you can make scalable, and leverage the partners and other channels and resources for non-scalable parts. So again, here a franchise model to build Starbucks chain is that, of course, Starbucks itself, if they would be running every single coffee shop in the world, that would not be them focusing on the scalable part of the business, but actually the non-scalable parts. But have enough experience and do also the non-scalable parts to be able to deliver and develop these concepts for those who are doing the non-scalable parts in a formalized and in a packaged format. So in the beginning, for example, when Uber gets started, they were first providing even the rides themselves. So they were not using external drivers to drive, and they started in a very focused use case, first to start driving people from specific events where there was a high demand of the rides, but there was poor availability of the rides, so they came to accommodate that in the marketplace, and then further they started to then expand and replace those non-scalable parts that would also require a lot of investments with the partner model, and then changing it to, or whether it was on their strategy to do it as a platform, but to initiate that business model, they had to start from manual and their own models first. So transitioning from doing it as your own business, means also giving up on businesses and revenue to achieve that scalability. But at the same time, it also lowers the need for investment into those non-scalable parts of the business. So some of the business model considerations, there's the parts that grow organically, that you may look for the partnership models to help scale. Those types of things take significant investment and effort to put in place. In Uber's case, that would be to find a car and a driver, and then managing them as an employee, or even as a direct agreement for individual drivers. In Starbucks case, it would mean to find a location to start the business, to set up, to build the whole location, to get all the equipment in place and start to run the business. So these same considerations can be taken in different light. The online growth, what can be done digitally, is always a good scaling part, but there's also parts inside that that are not scaling or harder to scale. Those can be the support functions or development functions or whatnot. Franchising is a good model, as we have used here, to consider. All of these require its own deeper learning and study, but the point here in this module is to cover and give ideas of the different aspects that should be looked into the context of own growth and own business and markets and so forth. Then, of course, when you have enough scale and size, you can also have the strategy to start buying others. So if there are similar businesses or there are ready talent teams who maybe even tried to run similar business, but they didn't get it off the ground, maybe they didn't know how to do some parts, you could look after buying existing companies and teams. That becomes when you have enough resources to do so. But in addition, you could also look to merge. So you could also merge, and let's say there's a company A and company B, you could just merge those to form a company C, and then you would just have grown the operations and team and perhaps even locational presence with such strategy. And they are typical, I mean, from all of this you can find case studies online, you can Google and so forth. For example, some of the big brands have been come to light by someone actually just going, for example, let's say a pet store chain or a mobile phone store chain at some point. Someone just basically decided that there's now so many of these small actors that let's just negotiate with every one of them and see if they are wanting to commit to become a part of a big chain all at once. So going through 25 pet stores and saying, hey, let's create a unified presence. Let's all become owners in this bigger entity, and then we have better resources to run the business and grow together instead of each of us just running our individual pet stores. We have more purchasing power, we have more capabilities for advertising, and so forth. And of course, those mergers don't have to be equal. It doesn't mean that two companies 50-50. It's the same as when considering how the equity is divided with the owner. Initial ownership from the first company is also the same logic that can be applied. What do they have as assets, resources, value for business? What should be their percentage of the new entity that is being created legal wise, and then it's also a separate decision which one has a stronger brand or stronger products to continue and so forth. Not necessarily easy things to do like anything in business. There is no such thing. There's just systematic way and strategies to apply. And of course, then cutting more of the activities that don't scale and basically leaving that to either competitors or to partners to run those parts of the business that are not the core of your business, that you may have needed for learning purposes, or you may have needed for financial to build financial buffer. But once you start getting some core elements to really work, you can start cutting off parts that you no longer are not making efficient use of how to do the business. In consideration of platform economy and platform business models, you can consider, instead of building your own platforms, on how you can feed from or feed other platforms and utilize other platforms to expand the business. So, for example, Airbnb famously utilized Craigslist very strategically and very automatic way to leverage the customer base that they have in that platform when they were building their own customer base. So these are considerations. And then, of course, the other way around, just instead of focusing on the product and service per se, you could become a platform that caters those types of products and services that are part of your mission and vision. And then, of course, like all the different variations you can sell, you can rent, subscription model, fixed pricing, indirect, freemium. On pricing side, you have low price, big audience, smaller segments, higher price. So you have a lot of variables that you can continue to work with. The key part, obviously, with all of this is that don't try to do too many things at once. When focus on to getting something to work, iterate, validate, or pivot, then test another one, and so forth. And each of these different things, depending how big or small they are, you should have different pace cycle for them so that you can accumulate enough learnings of all of these aspects. So to be aware of various strategies and opportunities and models doesn't mean you should look to apply them, but be aware, decide the first simple or core things for you, but then tap in back to see what other options or considerations they actually would be available for you. And now it's also time to do a check on context of the team before starting to grow the team and organization further. So recheck and update your own roles. So now it's you in the team building or the formation phase, you had these aspects, you put these certain things in the shareholder agreement, you discussed about your growth roles, how you will evolve during the company, review your shareholder agreement, review your positions, review your own learnings based on having worn many hats. So check in context of the ownership, the equity positions you have, the promises that you made in delivering time-wise, resources-wise, capabilities-wise to these functions, and how you have been executing, how the other team members have been executing, do any adjustments if needed. How have you worked or considered your role as a board of directors? How has that worked? Have you even remembered to work on this hat? When you have been working as management for other resources, evaluate your abilities as manager and managing work, managing processes, managing other people. And when you have been executing, when you have been doing coding, when you have been doing sales, when you have been doing marketing, when you have been doing design, documenting, whatever that may be, evaluate your work, evaluate the type of learnings you have accumulated, evaluate the assets you have in place, the documentations you have done, the folders you have created, the way you have managed the efficiency of your work, the KPIs you have in place, the gut feelings, everything, evaluate from this aspect and document them and document your learnings. So again, recheck what your initial considerations had been in the beginning. Where do you want to see yourself as the company grows, and what is that feeling now? And have a conversation with your core team members, founders, mentors, and so forth, and communicate if there is need to make change of how that path would evolve. So how do you see spending your time for the next, let's say, next couple of years, or to the remaining of what you have vesting in place for the shareholder agreement? What after that? Have your team members identified actually skills about you that you didn't identify yourself? Like just looking at what are the current resources in place, and trying to capture as much of the things that you have had so far before really starting to focus on the scaling phase. Because now really the target becomes to building that great company, and it starts by documenting, creating processes, managing processes, being able to fly without actually feeling the plane, by the KPIs and the metrics in place, and dividing your work and continuing to dividing your work more and more to other people, delegating and finding additional people through other means to build that great company that caters for all of the key stakeholders involved, from customers to shareholders to board of directors to operative management, advisors and partners, and of course all the people in the whole team. So again, the definition for really what would be considered as a great company, it's a self-sustaining entity that is not dependent on any single individual or other organization, where all the necessary knowledge, values, strategies, IPRs are permanently embedded into its structures in a way that it can continue to operate, improve, and build value for customers, shareholders, and all the other key stakeholders, while remaining financially stable by the value of solutions and products it creates and delivers. So it's really a self-sustaining structure, and in a built in such way that it's not dependent on any single factor. And of course, this is not easy to do. This is very difficult to do. You can look at any of the big companies out there and you can consider how well they have achieved this and how well they are able to maintain this. And what you see through media is not necessarily the same as the reality, but anyway, I think we have, if we just think of the very well-known organizations, if we think Amazon from this perspective, if we think Google from this perspective, if we think Apple from this perspective, if we think Facebook from this perspective, if we think AT&T from this perspective, if we think of Supercell from this perspective, or Microsoft, I think we can all have an idea of how well they have achieved or where they have some challenges or risks embedded.